Besties, tonight we are diving into something darker than anyone expected, because Blake Lively is not just fighting a lawsuit. She is fighting to control the entire story, and what if I told you that behind the scenes, her moves are not about justice, but about shaping headlines, twisting narratives, and silencing voices. This is not the fairy tale Hollywood image you were sold. This is a saga of power, money, and control. And once you hear what has been uncovered, you will not look at her the same way again. Blake Lively stood on that stage and told the world that what we choose to speak about and what we remain silent about truly matters. That what we monetize versus what we live through matters. And she hinted at a truth she has been carrying for the last 2 years, but stopped short of saying it directly. Instead, she left an opening. A suspenseful silence that made everyone wonder what was hiding underneath that calm delivery and what would eventually surface. And soon it became clear that what she was holding back was not simply about empowerment, but about a calculated strategy that blurred the lines between activism and performance. And when she aligned herself with a movement that had been born out of genuine pain, courage, and sacrifice, she began shifting the focus from the women who had spoken out to herself. And suddenly the entire landscape of the case she was pursuing became less about truth and more about theater. And this is where the layers of contradiction begin to pile up. Because on one hand, Blake presented herself as a woman silenced, oppressed, and retaliated against. But on the other hand, she filed no less than 3 separate motions in just 8 months, each demanding money, punitive damages attorneys, fees, sanctions, and even treble damages. A relentless storm of filings, each dressed up in the same dramatic language designed to catch attention in both the courtroom and the press. And every time a new motion hit the docket, headlines followed just as if the motions themselves had been written with reporters in mind. And while some women had used the Me Too movement to shine light on abuse and bring perpetrators to justice, Blake seemed to weaponize its credibility for her personal gain, aligning herself with victims, while also employing lawyers from one of the most controversial firms in Hollywood, the very same firm that once represented Harvey Weinstein. And if that sounds shocking, it should, because the idea of standing up for women while standing next to lawyers who built their reputation protecting powerful men accused of wrongdoing is a contradiction that screams louder than anything else. And it is here where suspense builds. Because what if the case she is fighting is not about truth, but about image management, about a chess game of legal maneuvers and public relations tactics, designed not to resolve pain, but to amplify it until it drowns out the other side. Wayfarer, the company now entangled in this battle, has not been innocent either, because they chose to combine crisis PR with legal defense. And that mistake opened the door to discovery fights, privilege disputes, and rulings that forced private communications into the open. Because while conversations between lawyers and clients are privileged, once PR enters the picture, the shield collapses and judges can order those emails to be turned over. And so the question became less about whether Blake had a case and more about whether the process itself was being manipulated for headlines, both sides guilty, both sides feeding the spectacle. And yet Blake continued to demand not only dismissal of Wayfarer's claims, but also a declaration that she was the prevailing party, a winner in a game that has not even gone to trial, and her legal team tried to use California anti-SLAPP law, a statute designed to protect free speech from retaliatory lawsuits. But in federal court in New York, a district that has consistently rejected those statutes as conflicting with federal rules, and yet she asked again and again, give me the win, give me the money, declare me the victim. It is here where the contradictions begin to unravel further, because the very retaliation she claims is based on lawsuit statements and websites created in defense of claims she herself initiated. Lawsuits filed in response are not retaliation, they are defense. And once you enter a courtroom, employment retaliation rules no longer apply. But Blake insisted that every action taken by Wayfarer, every filing, every press statement, every website was an attempt to silence her. And the more she insisted, the more it appeared that she was not seeking truth, but seeking to maintain control of the narrative, to reinforce over and over that she was the victim. And the headlines followed her narrative, faithfully repeating her claims as if they were facts, while the court reminded everyone that at this stage they remain allegations. And here lies the tension, the suspense that keeps audiences gripped, because what if the evidence does not match her story? What if the discovery process reveals cracks, contradictions, and holes that no PR spin can fill already? Jed Wallace exposed vulnerabilities in her filings, showing that she may have chosen the wrong jurisdiction entirely, that California was the proper forum, not New York, and Blake scrambled to reframe this as further retaliation, filing another motion, another demand for damages, another attempt to shift the focus away from flaws in her case to the idea that she was under attack. And all the while, questions began circling about Ryan Reynolds, his name appearing in court filings as if his reputation too was at stake, as if behind the scenes he was shaping the moves, orchestrating the battle to protect his own image. And here suspense deepens. Because while none of us can know the full truth, what we do see is a woman relentlessly pursuing motions that echo the same recycled claims, a strategy that looks more like PR than legal strength, and a courtroom drama that may collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. If summary judgment is filed, and the judge determines that her claims do not meet the legal threshold, the entire facade may crumble. And the motions once heralded in headlines will be exposed as nothing more than retaliatory plays in a media war, and still Blake does not stop. She pushes again and again, determined to drown out doubt with repetition, determined to make her voice the loudest in the room, and that is where we are left watching a spectacle that is less about justice and more about performance. The whispers in Hollywood had grown into a roar, and it was impossible to ignore anymore because every time Blake Lively stepped into the spotlight, there seemed to be another misstep, another awkward moment, another staged smile that felt more like a shield than a genuine expression, and the audience could sense it. The public could smell the desperation, the cracks in the perfect facade, and the more she tried to control the narrative, the more it slipped out of her hands because Hollywood is merciless when it senses weakness. It circles like a predator, and right now Blake Lively was bleeding in the water. The once golden image she had carefully built was being chipped away one headline at a time, one awkward video at a time, and it was not just her anymore because Ryan Reynolds, the man once praised as the most charming star in Hollywood, was also being dragged into the storm. Fans were pulling out old stories, childhood encounters, and posts that painted him in a very different light, no longer the harmless, sarcastic hero, but someone whose past was coming back to haunt him. And as those posts circulated, the internet reacted with fury and disbelief. The mask of the Hollywood nice guy was slipping, and it was slipping fast. And that made the stage appearance even more disastrous because the eyes were already on them, waiting for the next crack. Waiting for the moment they could point and say, "See, we knew it all along." And when Blake rambled on stage, her words tumbling out without direction, the room grew tense. Her laughter felt hollow, her smile strained, and in the back of the room, cameras captured every second, feeding the frenzy online. And when she exited the staged photo op with autograph seekers was supposed to repair the damage, to remind people she was still adored. But the problem was, it looked fake too, polished, too forced. And the internet can always tell the difference between real love and manufactured adoration. The backlash was immediate, and the damage irreversible. And as this was happening, Ryan was nowhere to be seen. Not in the crowd. Not backstage. His absence spoke louder than any speech, because silence in moments like this is damning. The narrative was building, and it was won. Neither of them could control anymore. The power couple image was unraveling thread by thread, and Hollywood was not going to let it go quietly. The night after that event, the conversations online turned darker and sharper, and every platform was filled with clips, theories, and questions, and what made it worse was that other celebrities began to distance themselves subtly, but unmistakably, unfollowing. Liking shady posts, avoiding being photographed near Blake or Ryan, and Hollywood thrives on these silent signals because everyone reads between the lines, and when the whispers become collective, the isolation begins. And suddenly, it felt as though Blake was standing alone under the bright lights with nowhere to hide, because even her allies seemed hesitant to defend her. And the narrative grew arms and legs, with fans dissecting every past interview, every clip, every red carpet glance, trying to prove that the cracks were always there, hidden just beneath the surface. And when old footage of her awkward remarks resurfaced, it only added fuel to the fire. The internet loves a downfall, especially one that feels inevitable. And now it was being treated as entertainment, a slow, unraveling broadcast in real time. And Ryan, who once deflected with humor, was now strangely quiet. His social media presence reduced his once sharp wit absent, and that silence only created more suspicion, more speculation, because people wondered if he was protecting Blake or protecting himself. And every silence, every absence became a story of its own. And as tabloids began to publish exposés digging into their past behavior, The cracks widened further because what was once dismissed as gossip now felt like evidence pieces of a puzzle, falling into place, and Hollywood insiders spoke anonymously to journalists, painting pictures of arrogance, of entitlement, of carefully crafted images maintained at the expense of authenticity, and those words cut deeper than any staged photo op could repair. And when Blake tried again to smile for the cameras, the effect was opposite, because the smile looked heavy and tired, and the world could see it. The aura of control had vanished, and once that aura is gone, the fall becomes unstoppable. Like a train already off the tracks, moving faster with every headline, with every meme, and as more stories emerged, the public who once adored them shifted into spectators of a spectacle, into critics, savoring each reveal, and Hollywood itself began preparing for the fallout, because in that industry, reputation is currency, and right now theirs was collapsing in real time. By the time the week ended, the pressure was unbearable, and every appearance, every silence, every headline pushed the weight heavier on their shoulders, because this was no longer just a rough patch. This was a reckoning unfolding in front of millions. And the story had reached a point where it was no longer about whether they could repair their image, but whether they could survive it at all. Because once Hollywood decides to turn its back, there is rarely a way to fully return. And people whispered about contracts, brand deals, and scripts being quietly pulled away from the table, about phone calls not returned, about doors slowly closing. And Blake knew it, and Ryan knew it. And the look in their eyes said it all, because behind the stage smiles there was fear. A raw fear that could not be hidden by makeup or lighting or careful angles, the fear of losing control, of losing power, of losing relevance. And when the cracks become this visible, the feeding frenzy only intensifies, because everyone wants a piece of the downfall. Everyone wants to claim they saw it first, and the media stoked the fire with dramatic headlines while fans dissected body language in slow-motion videos, and experts debated what this meant for their future, and all of it built into a storm that could not be escaped, and every attempt to shift the narrative only backfired. Because the harder they tried, the more desperate it appeared, the more obvious the struggle became. And Hollywood thrives on fresh faces, on flawless images. And when an empire begins to crumble, it is often replaced swiftly without sentiment, and that was the unspoken truth behind every headline, behind every awkward clip. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, once untouchable, now stood at the edge of collapse, with the entire world watching and waiting for the inevitable. Fall. The story of Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds had once been written like a fairy tale, but now it read like a tragedy, unraveling page by page. And the most chilling part was that it was happening in plain sight. Every awkward smile, every stumble, every silence becoming evidence of a fall that seemed impossible only months ago. Yet here it was, unfolding relentlessly. The carefully crafted image of perfection had cracked, and the cracks had spread until they were impossible to conceal anymore. And Hollywood never forgives the appearance of weakness. It never forgets the sight of fear. And that was what made this moment so devastating. Because no matter how desperately they tried to control the narrative, it had slipped beyond their reach and into the hands of a public eager to witness the collapse, the photo ops. The rehearsed lines, the charming deflections, all of it rang hollow, now replaced by whispers of arrogance, entitlement, and manipulation. And the worst part was the silence between them. Ryan, fading from view. Blake forcing her way through the lights alone. Each absence more telling than words, and every rumor, every resurfaced story fed into a cycle that could no longer be stopped. The world was not asking if the fall would happen anymore. The world was asking when it would be complete, and whether either of them would rise again from the wreckage their empire built on smiles and charm stood trembling on fragile ground. And as the cameras continued to flash and the headlines multiplied, one truth became impossible to deny. The fall had already begun, and there was no turning back, because once Hollywood decides to watch you burn, it never looks away. It only waits for the final spark.